המסגרת שלנו היא מסגרת מצומצמת ואינטימית של 20-30 אנשים, הגיעו לכאן הערב אולי פי 2 מהכמות. אני חושב שזה מבטא איזשהו רצון עז, ככה כמו שאני מרגיש אותו, של הדור השלישי, לדעת ולהכיר ואפילו לחוות, הייתי אומר, את מה שחוו הסבים והסבתות שלנו, לאו דווקא במהלך השואה, גם לפני השואה, גם בעיירה שלהם, ואני חושב שמר זבורובסקי ייגע בזה גם היום. ודבר נוסף, אני אומר לא רק העבר, אני חושב שגם העתיד. אני לפחות שואל את עצמי כדור שלישי, מה המשימה שלנו, מה התפקיד שלנו בחזון של 40-50 שנה קדימה, מבחינת זיכרון השואה, מבחינת כל דבר שקשור להיסטוריה של העם היהודי בהקשר הזה. לשם כך, לכבוד גדול לנו להזמין הערב את מר אלי זבורowski.
שמי אלי זborowski, קוראים אותי אילי, כי זה קצרו את השם פרטי, מאליעזר לאילי. אז אני אילי. עכשיו אני כבר מעל 40 שנה, אני חבר הנהלה של יד ושם, ואני היחידי מחוץ לארץ, חבר הנהלת ביד ושם. לפני 31 שנה, אני הקמתי איגוד בינלאומי למען יד ושם, ואני יושב ראש מאותו הזמן מהאיגוד בינלאומי למען יד ושם. אני נולדתי בעיירה קטנה, זה מה שקוראים שטטל. אז זאת הייתה שטטל, והיו קהילות כאלה. בפולניה היו 1,700 קהילות בעיירה קטנה. היות שהיה קטנה, היו כמעט 4,000 יהודים ורק 2,500 לא יהודים. אז זאת הייתה a Jewish community, a Jewish shtetl. Myself, I grew up as a happy child in a happy family where my father was a businessman. He was a leather handler, and he had a storage, and he was, in a sense, it was a well-to-do family. But for us, we didn't understood the difference from very well or not, but we had enough bread, we have even butter, we had even something on top of it. And this was our life. We grew up as happy children. We were 3 children. Myself was the oldest. I have a brother who survived together with me, Marvin, he's in the United States. And the 3rd child, my sister, she is here. This is the grandmother of Chaim and the mother of Yafa. My father was always speaking about Palestine at that time. It was his aim and his vision one day to be in Palestine. But since he was interrupted in education in the First World War, he was born in 1903, and the First World War broke out in 1914. He was 11 years old. He was interrupted in his education. He wanted to make sure that we, the children of our father, meaning we, our home, that we will get the proper education. He said, yes, I want to go to Palestine, but my children have to finish at least high school. At the time when I lived at my age, to attend high school. The high school was equal what is today college. We lived in a house where the feeling for Eretz Yisrael was not only L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim, but it was constantly spoken about Palestine, constantly spoken about Eretz Yisrael. My father was not a member of a Zionist organization, but was in those days, for a religious Jew, one has to be a little bit on a distance. But he wanted very much to see me growing up and joining the Shomer Hadati, which this was the youth organization for Mizrahi. But as it happened, I became a member of a completely different organization that didn't suit well with my father's beliefs. But as a child, I was 11 years old, 12 years old, what did I know of the difference from one organization to the other? And I joined the Hashomer HaTzair. Imagine, I was going every day to shul in the morning, in the evening, and I was a member of Hashomer HaTzair. If you can think that I knew the difference, no. If it was for me a difference, it was that the people, especially even the girls, were better good looking over there. So this is why I went. But that's the truth. I can remember that I cared very much to be there. And then on summertime, it was Pirkei Avot. Saturday afternoon, that was the time to take a rest and sleep. But when we woke up, I had to sit down with my father and with him together to go over Pirkei Avot. This was his teachings, and his behavior was to me that the great teaching that I didn't even realize how much I had learned from my father. He had wanted to see us being and living in Israel. He unfortunately didn't survive the war. He ran away from the Germans and was on his way to a hiding place where my late mother and the two children, my younger brother and sister, were hiding. And he didn't arrive. He was killed on the way by Poles. The Second World War broke out on September the 1st. This was on a Friday. Our town was very close to the German border. On the second day of the war, that means on Saturday, bombs fell in our town. The town was bombed. And some of the bombs fell in front of our house. In our house, the front wall was destroyed completely. And lucky that we had the storage place for our store was in the back. And somehow there were alarms that something happens. My father was somehow, by some intuition, had taken the whole family to the storage place in the back, so nothing happened to us. But the whole back of our front house was bombed. Our neighbors were killed, some of the people. A lot of people were just, and this was, the center of the town was Jewish. So a lot of Jews at that time, the second day of the war, were already killed through bombing the area. And in the afternoon, late in the afternoon, in the early evening, Germans were already in the town. So we had the great pleasure, in quotation mark, to see Germans right the second day of the war. Right from the beginning, the Germans had a very clear direction how to deal with Jews, simply to dehumanize. They just dehumanized them. They were looking for the people that they have a bird with peyot, without peyot, immediately in the middle of the town, just making a show by cutting the bird. And the Poles, as few or as many they were in town, they were being around laughing at the Jews. And then the Germans had the pleasure of just dehumanizing the people. The rules, the rules of the Germans were that 3 people, no more than 3 people, can get together. They were not allowed to be more than 3 people. But the Jews that went to the shul, not to the two big synagogues, where it was very officially, but the shtibels, the people that they were Hasidim from one rabbi or another, were going day in, day out, morning and evening, praying in shuls, just to be with the minyan and to pray. So that means to say that although they were just risking with their lives, they believed that they have to continue, that they have to continue doing what they were used to do, but just going to a shul to daven. That was the way how Jews were resisting in the way they could. It wasn't resisting with a gun, it was resisting all the restrictions that they had by the Germans, but they were doing what it was proper for them to do. And this was it. And we as children went with the parents. That was the life which started with the thing. They were in such a way that they would have taken out, if they came to a place where Jews were just davening, they would just take out the people with the talesim and just asking them to go home for brooms, come back with the talesim and clean the street. This is a kind of dehumanization of people. And that was the way. We lived in the small town, we lived in an open ghetto. That means there was no fence and there were no walls that we couldn't leave, but there were signs in a given street that behind this sign is the death sentence if you are found to be after this, behind these walls. No walls, but the signs that this is after the ghetto. Myself was already used to go and knew where Częstochow is. And as a member, as young as I was, not in the first months, but later in the year 40, in the end of it, the organization that I was a member of, and it was at this time the Hashomer HaTzair, it was immediately walking. We were still meeting during the war. We were meeting and having our own discussions about Eretz Yisrael. That was all what it was. No other politics, but Eretz Yisrael was the politics that we carried on. And obviously, we have been very natural working as an organization, although we were not allowed to be more than 3 people. We were getting together 5 or 8 or 10 people together and just enjoying discussions about Eretz Yisrael, or from time to time, people were coming shlichim from the Haganah Rashid, that means from the head offices. They were visiting with us. Among them was in later years, in the year 41, end of 41, beginning of 42, Mordechai Yanilevich was 2-3 times in our town. So we met him, and we have seen him. He walked, he spoke with us. But this was our life during the war. We, the young people, have already been able to make our resistance. As young as we were just doing that. And came the time when deportations started. And the deportations were called that they are taking the Jews to the east. Of course, we had no idea where the east was. The east was to death camps. From our town, later we found out it was Treblinka. But we were unaware of it. But in a town like in our town, where there were 4,000 Jews, we heard all kinds of rumors that there were deportations here and there. When they came for the deportation of our town, there were only 800. 3,000 Jews ran out from the town. But they ran where? They had no place where to run. They ran to the villages where there were Poles. And they didn't offer any place to be. Some of them were in the forests. So at the end, they got back little by little to the town. The Germans allowed them to come back, and they were thinking it's already the end. They deported the 800, the rest is alive. After a short time, a few months, They were already a few hundred people again. They were taking them out again and again, shipping them out from the town to it. My father was, for some money or whatever the connections were, he was able to get to a place where they worked for the Germans in construction. In that place, he became friendly with the man, the Pole, the non-Jew, who was in charge of the Jewish people by working there. And this was a person who was building once the house for my father. And he spoke with this man, and he asked him, please, my wife and children are just in the empty attics of the empty houses where there were no longer Jews. And they are freezing. It was winter. It was the winter of 42, the end of 42. And he asked the man if he would be willing to take his wife, meaning my mother and the two children, taking and hiding them in his home. The man agreed, and my late mother and the two younger children went there into hiding. This was the end of January, beginning of February 1943 already. I, at that time, was already a member of the Jewish Fighters Organization, which was no longer only the Zionist organization, but that was a united organization of fighters that were ready to fight, but they were looking for ammunition, which they never got, and therefore they remained only with the name. And as a member of this organization, I was a connection man, bringing news and distributing the illegal paper that came from Warsaw through Częstochow, and I was then carrying it from place to place, from ghetto to ghetto, wherever I was told to go. I looked very good as a Szegitz, not so much Jewish. I was able to speak a perfect Polish without an accent, and I had papers made by the underground with a different name. Zborowski looked very much Polish, but it was not good for me, so I had a different name. I was Lucjan Wesolowski, not Zborowski. And as such, I was then busy with it. My father was not happy. He was afraid for me, but this was the place of hiding was for my late mother, Zal, and my younger two children, which was my brother and my sister. And walking between the ghettos, it came a time when all the ghettos were already closed, and they took out the people primarily from the ghettos that I was in contact with, and they sent them to the working camps, not only to concentration camps, but working camps, where they had been closed in a certain place, and they couldn't be. So I was cut off from a contact with the people. At that time, before that, I had promised my father, when he asked me, he got a little sick. He was afraid that something can happen to him. He asked me, please, you see how I am and what conditions I am, then I would want you, please, stay with the family, meaning with the mother and the two younger children, because I don't know what it can happen to me. So at that time, I asked my father, I promise you I will do it, but I will have to go to the headquarters in Częstochow and tell them that I'm taking off. He said, yes, but I want to have from you a promise that you will take care of it. I promised my father, and I went to Częstochow. When I came to Częstochow, it was the day before, and on that day when I came was the end of the ghetto. There was no more ghetto. It was taking the people out from the ghetto and giving into a camp in the same city, but closed up in a camp. There was no longer ghetto. So I remained without a contact, and at that time, I had no other way but then to go to my mother and to the two younger children to be there with them. So I came to the hiding place 6 months later that my mother and younger children were there. And I remained in that place for 12 more months. And my mother and the children were already 18 months. We were bored to the utmost, but we had a very rich library in the city. So the people were the Poles were just going there and taking the books to use it into an oven, just to burn it, to use it. We had these books. We were reading the books 3 times the same, just again and again reading the books. This was what we were busy. I had written at that time a yoman, a diary. And the diary survived somehow. And people had received it here in Israel already. But I had no shlita. I don't know what happened to the yoman. But anyway, the life in the place was that you can imagine we were in an attic and we couldn't walk out, neither to the street, not to the backyard. And we were there. My family was there for 18 months. I was there for 12 months. At a given time, the men where we were in hiding had told us that there are rumors that Jews are in his house. On the same day, in the night, after 12 o'clock, we decided to leave the place and go to another place. What do you mean to another place? My father was always the person haroeh et hanolad. That's what he taught me, and that's what he walked with me. That's what he showed me in the Pirkei Avot. Eize chacham haroeh et hanolad. He had prepared this place for my late mother and the children in Jarki, in the town, in center, by that man where we were there for my family for 18 months, I for 12, and to the east, another place in a village, and to the west, another place, in case we need to run away. So in that place to the east, he put in my mother's 2 sisters. They were there, and her uncle, and we decided to go there to the east, where my family was there. So they were already 6 people, and we were now 4. We got to this place and remained there for another 6 months. So together, my family was 24 months in hiding. I was 18 months in hiding. The other 6 months I was there. The man who was then from ghetto to ghetto, working in the contacts and on behalf of the Jewish Fighters Organization. The fact that we were liberated, I just remember like today, the 17th of January 1945, when we were in hiding still in a basement, and the Polish men where we were hiding had asked me to come out because the Russians are here. There was a Russian man, he was dressed completely white, it was snow, it was January in Poland, and when I saw the man, and I saw him with his mustache, a typical Russian Cossack, I fell to the ground, I kissed his boots, just for the happiness that I'm there. We were still there for another day in hiding, being afraid that in case the Germans will return, that we may just be going out from the But a day after, we left the place and we started to go more to the east, being afraid that the Germans may come back. But anyway, the way it was, that the Russian army, the Red Army, was continuing going further west, and we were lucky, after about a week's time, we returned to our hometown. When we returned to our hometown, we had a feeling like being on a cemetery, because there were empty houses. The house of my grandparents was empty. There were no grandparents. The house of this uncle, that uncle, another aunt, another uncle, cousins, everything was empty. So we were just feeling like we are walking on a cemetery. And that makes us leave as early as we could to leave Poland and get further to the way of Palestine. And the end of it, I spoke before. My goral was that I landed in America. My sister came here, happy as she is. She has a family, and we are happy with them. I have 2 children that they were born in the States, and both children have made Aliyah. Now, I want you to know one thing. As I said, over 40 years ago, I became the member of the Hanhala of Yad Vashem. 31 years ago, I felt that we Jews from outside of Israel should partner with Yad Vashem and spend money and bring money from Chutz La'aretz to be partners with Yad Vashem in building Yad Vashem, teaching the Holocaust history, reminding the world, fighting anti-Semitism, and that's what I was doing now for 31 years. The most important things that we achieved, not only the millions of dollars that we were able to bring here to Israel for the well-being and the existence and the activities of Yad Vashem, but the best thing, the most important thing that I was able to get about 12 years ago to make sure that the Holocaust will be remembered by whom? The 3rd generation and their friends, not only children or grandchildren from survivors, but they and their friends or their spouses, the wives or the husbands, which are not children or grandchildren from survivors, they will be the guardians of the future. You, the 3rd generation, you will hold the torch of remembrance. You will remember 20 and 40 years from now to say, I heard a survivor speaking. I know what it means, a survivor. I remember my grandparents. I remember my parents telling stories from it. So we rely on you. You are the ones that I'm happy to be with you. I hope you understand my English. I hope that I can explain you what our life was, how dear it was to us to be a member of a Jewish kihila, of a Jewish community, how happy I was as a child with my parents and how this was broken. And this was not only me, it was the 6 million of us, our friends, my colleagues, my friends, the boys, the girls. We had a happy childhood, but we had no youth. When there was youth, I was already a fighter. I was already a grown-up person, taking responsibilities, going from place to place, risking my life, the life of my family, but I was doing it gladly. But now I want you to remember your own families, that they had told you the stories. And for me, as a survivor, I'm sharing with you my feelings, what I lost, and what I am happy to have built up. After the war, I was just looking forward to get married, to have a wife, to have children. What we expect in the 3rd generation to do is just to be able to carry the torch and the dedication. The dedication is very important, not just to do something leman yoitze, just to be called, we did something, but to be dedicated to remember. Because you are the shlichim for the future. 100 years from now, no one will believe that such things did happen. Because how could that have been possible to take nice little children and kill them? Why? People would not be able to understand that. But you will have to be able to say, I heard a ניצול השואה saying it, אני את הריע. So, אתם עדים שמיע, אבל שמיע לפחות שראיתם ורואים את הניצול השואה. מה הוא אומר, מה הוא מספר, איך זה עבר. We are expecting from you that you speak further to your children, to your grandchildren, and to the other generations ahead.
אני רוצה להודות מאוד
Okay, go down. Thank you.